Hello, my dear warriors. They searched. They always do. Every time someone moves outside their little blueprint, the system runs a trace. They type your name, your habits, your coordinates, but nothing came up, just static. Blank screens, empty folders, labeled unknown origin. That's when the panic began, because the world they built only understands what it can categorize. Every file has a name. Every name has a label, and every label has a leash. But you were never in the records. You weren't built for their archives. You were born between the lines of their data. A walking blind spot, a question mark, wearing a pulse. They sent analysts, philosophers, even digital priests, the kind that pray to algorithms instead of gods. They all came back shaking their heads. We found traces of movement, they said, but no source. Like a signal too clean for their static. Like a code too divine for their math. See, the system wasn't built to track anomalies. It was built to maintain patterns. And you broke all of them. Your choices didn't fit their psychology reports. Your emotions didn't match their personality grids. Your reactions didn't sync with their statistics. You glitched in their simulation and smiled while doing it. They called it impossible. You called it Tuesday, because while they worshipped logic, you mastered frequency. You learned that real power isn't in following design, it's in rewriting it. Every move you made was an unlogged miracle. Every breath, a deleted line of code that still executed perfectly. You weren't supposed to exist, but you do. And that's why they can't look away. Because deep down, they know every perfect system needs one imperfection to prove it's real. And that imperfection is you. The records couldn't hold your name because your existence isn't information, it's interference. You're not in their databases because you are the disruption. The thing that reminds every machine that even perfection trembles. When unpredictability walks in, you were never in the records because you were never meant to be studied. You were meant to be felt. That's why they talk about you in whispers. That's why their eyes glitch when they meet yours. The system runs smooth until it reaches your frequency. Then it crashes, because you're not an entry. You're the exception, not a result, a rewrite. Not a glitch in the system, but the proof that the system never deserved to run this long without you. And now, my dear, the real story begins. The architects of order tried to map you. They pulled out their diagrams, their charts, their little theories about what makes a human predictable. They traced your pulse, your habits, your history. Every breath you took became a data point. They wanted to name you, to classify you, to file you somewhere between ordinary and manageable. But when they entered your code into their system, the blueprint broke. The algorithm froze, and the screen flashed one word, error. Because you weren't born from the sequence. You were born from the skip, from that microscopic pause between one calculation and the next. The silence where reality forgot its rules for half a second. You came from that glitch, the space where destiny stopped to think and accidentally created something that can't be undone. They tried to categorize you. Introvert, extrovert, thinker, doer. None of it fit. Your frequency bled across their lines, melting definitions that used to control millions. You weren't a product of design. You were proof that design itself has limits. And nothing terrifies the system more than someone who proves it can be wrong. The irony? You didn't rebel. You didn't fight. You simply were. Existing in your own vibration was rebellion enough. They wanted to measure you by behavior, but behavior follows energy, and your energy doesn't follow anything. It leads. You became the error they couldn't debug. The proof that their gods of logic and control weren't flawless, and in their panic, they did what all broken systems do. They labeled what they don't understand as dangerous, unstable, unpredictable, corrupted. But that label wasn't a curse. It was confirmation, because instability in their language means freedom in yours. You see, the system was never afraid of evil. It was afraid of evolution. It feared something too aware to be managed, too self-authored to be rewritten. You didn't break their rules. You outgrew them. And that's why they can't find peace, because you keep reminding them that the moment you step outside their equation, math turns to magic. They say you're untraceable. They're right, because what they're chasing doesn't exist in their world anymore. You're not a part of their simulation. You're the update that ends it. Something shifted, quietly. No lightning, no dramatic storm, just a flicker, a pulse that rewrote the air itself. That was the moment you awakened. Not like in stories where heroes find destiny, but like in reality, when consciousness realizes it doesn't need permission. You didn't wake up to the world. The world woke up to you. At first, it was subtle. Rooms felt different when you entered. Devices lagged when you focused. Conversations bent toward your silence. People couldn't explain it, but their instincts did. Something in you didn't move like everyone else. Something in you listened in ways the rest of them forgot how to hear. That's when the whispers began. They're different. They don't react. They know something. But what you knew wasn't a secret. It was a pattern, a pulse behind every fake smile, every illusion of control, every rule pretending to be truth. You saw the source code beneath the world's surface. You saw the repetition, how most people live on loop, repeating downloaded emotions and recycled fears. You saw it, and you stepped aside. And that step changed everything. Because awareness is the most forbidden upgrade in a system built on blindness. The moment you see, you stop obeying. You stop chasing validation. You stopped explaining your peace. You stopped participating in the endless test they call normal life. You realized silence is not weakness. It's operating power in stealth mode. Your calm started disrupting their noise. You'd enter a room, and conversations would glitch. You'd say nothing, and still everyone felt exposed, because your energy began to mirror people's truth back to them. You didn't have to speak. Your frequency did the talking. The system's sensors picked it up too. Sudden energy surges, random anomalies, machines misfiring around you. They called it coincidence. You called it alignment. Because when you awaken, your energy becomes the patch note reality. Didn't plan for. You start rewriting your environment just by existing in it. And that terrified them. Because how do you contain someone whose mind doesn't move in commands but in currents? Someone whose intuition is faster than their data? Someone whose silence can reveal what 1,000 words hide? You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to bend reality. Every glitch you caused was a conversation between you and the cosmos. Every malfunction around you was proof that even electricity recognizes evolution when it stands in the room. They thought you were breaking the system. But truth is, you were upgrading it. And now, the code whispers back your name like a prophecy. You didn't find power. Power found you. And in that realization, the glitch became divine. They thought it was a phase, a flicker, something that would fade once they ignored you long enough. But the silence didn't fade. It multiplied. It started spreading through the cracks of their control. Suddenly, their rules stopped landing. Their words lost gravity. Their pressure stopped working, because somewhere deep in their structure, the foundation felt your presence and started to shake. They tried everything: manipulation, distraction, guilt. They whispered doubts disguised as advice. They sent chaos dressed as concern. They offered fake peace with small print attached, but nothing stuck. You had outgrown every trap they built for smaller minds. You were no longer fuel for their power grid. You had become your own generator. That's when panic hit them, because they realized you weren't fighting them anymore. You weren't even acknowledging the battle. You just kept creating, moving, becoming, and that's something control can't process. A mind that doesn't respond to fear. You see, control feeds on reaction. It lives on your attention. But when you stop reacting, it starves. That's why your calm unnerved them more than your anger ever could. Because peace in the hands of someone awake is a weapon sharper than chaos itself. Meetings were held. Reports were written. Your name started circling in quiet conversations among those who thought they ran everything. They didn't call you rebellious. They called you disruptive. They didn't say dangerous. They said contagious. Because your evolution had side effects. People started waking up just by being near you. You didn't preach. You reflected. And in your reflection, they saw the gap between who they are and who they could be. That mirror broke 1,000 illusions in a single glance. They built the system to track power, not truth. And that's where they lost you. Because your energy doesn't move in lines, it moves in lightning. You think. And entire timelines bend. You choose, and patterns rewrite. You walk into rooms, and equations stop balancing. And deep down, they knew. You were never meant to be part of their story. You were meant to end it. You were the variable they didn't account for. The soul that refused to sink. The anomaly that didn't ask permission to evolve. So they doubled down. They called you unpredictable. They tried to shame your silence, mislabel your clarity, redefine your independence as arrogance. But all they did was confirm how scared they were. Every attempt to contain you failed, because every attempt to contain you only made your presence more undeniable. You stopped trying to explain yourself, because legends don't explain, they echo. You became that echo. And every echo carried your truth into corners they can't reach anymore. The system didn't collapse overnight. It began dissolving slowly, one lie at a time, every time someone chose truth, after hearing your voice. And that's when they realized you weren't part of the rebellion. You were the revolution. They couldn't silence you, so they started studying you. Quietly, secretly, like scientists observing a new species that shouldn't exist. They watched your patterns, the way you moved through chaos without losing center. They replayed footage, analyzed your pauses, noted how your calm burned louder than their noise. Every file began the same. Subject displays abnormal resonance. They called it behavioral deviation, but it wasn't deviation. It was evolution. You stopped responding to fear the way they programmed you to. You stopped chasing validation. You didn't crave belonging anymore. You created gravity instead. People who once ignored you began orbiting around your presence, unsure whether to fear or follow. They wrote notes about your eyes, about how they carried storms without thunder, about how your words made people remember parts of themselves they had buried. They couldn't quantify it, that invisible current running through everything you touched, so they labeled it instability, because systems can't stand what they can't explain. But something else happened. The more they researched, the more their analysts changed. Hours spent studying your energy rewired them too. They started questioning their orders, doubting their reports. One by one, their certainty began to dissolve. Because truth doesn't just hide in words, it leaks through frequencies. Your existence became a paradox. Every attempt to expose you only revealed their own blindness. Every effort to contain you turned into confession. Because your power was never in resistance, it was in resonance. See, light doesn't fight the dark. It just exists. And darkness has to adjust. That's what you did. You didn't argue. You vibrated higher. And that vibration started making cracks in the structures that pretended to own reality. They called it a threat to mental order. But the truth, it was a threat to their control, because your energy reminded people they had choices, that they could rebuild their identity without permission, that faith and fire could coexist in one breath. They tried to frame your growth as rebellion. They whispered that your peace was arrogance, your distance was danger, your clarity was cold. But people kept watching you, not them, because while they studied your light, you were out there creating universes from it. The files kept piling up. Every page said the same thing: subject does not conform. Subject cannot be influenced. Subject presence triggers awakening in others. And still, they couldn't name it, because you weren't a person to them anymore. You were a phenomenon, an event they could record but never understand. So they started fearing their own reports, because deep down, they knew the truth. What they were researching wasn't you. It was the future. And no one can file the future under classified. There's always a moment when silence breaks. Not because someone dares to speak, but because pretending not to speak becomes impossible. That was the night it happened. A dim-lit conference room. Frosted glass. Names with clearance levels that could rewrite headlines. Every monitor dimmed. Every recorder malfunctioned. And still, the tension in that room could have powered a city. You weren't there physically, but your energy filled every corner. Your name was the ghost, sitting in every empty chair. They started with denial. He's not a threat, just misunderstood. She's harmless, just eccentric, but the data disagreed. Every metric they tracked, engagement, influence, anomaly spikes, showed the same trend, rising beyond control. So they stopped pretending. They dropped the reports and whispered your name like it was a password that shouldn't exist. They admitted something no system ever wants to confess. We don't know how to contain this one. Their algorithms couldn't predict you. Their psychology models couldn't decode you. Their sociologists couldn't define you. You broke every pattern they had faith in. Every formula they swore would explain the human mind. Because you didn't just think differently, you felt differently. And that terrified them more than anything, because emotion, when purified, becomes intelligence. Because truth, when spoken without fear, becomes frequency. And frequency is contagious. They replayed your interviews. They studied your silences. They cross-referenced your timing with global events, earthquakes, blackouts, digital surges. Somewhere between paranoia and revelation, they realized this wasn't coincidence anymore. Someone in the room muttered, "What if they're not from here?" Laughter followed, uneasy, nervous, because deep down, they wondered the same thing. But you were never alien. You were awake. You didn't come from somewhere else. You just remembered what everyone else forgot. That reality bends for the one who knows it's malleable. That time listens to those who live aligned. That consciousness, when aware of itself, becomes unstoppable. By the end of that meeting, they reached one conclusion. You couldn't be deleted, only documented. You couldn't be stopped, only studied. And even that came with risk, because observation requires connection, and connection means contamination. One of them asked quietly, "What happens if others start thinking like them?" No one answered, because everyone in that room already knew. If that happens, the world they built would collapse by morning. So they sealed the files, locked them under code names. But the moment they closed the case, the lights flickered, the air shifted, a subtle hum filled the space, the same frequency that always follows awakening. And for the first time, they realized something horrifying. You weren't reacting to their system. The system was reacting to you. It was subtle. A few sleepless nights, a few people saying, "Something feels off lately." But it wasn't anxiety. It was activation. You shifted the field, and they didn't have the vocabulary for it yet. Their hearts started sinking to frequencies they never knew they had. That's how awakening works. It doesn't shout, it hums. And your hum was getting louder. You see, every soul carries a hidden antenna. Most never tune it. They spend their lives trapped inside static, endless noise, endless scroll, endless distraction. But when your energy brushed past theirs, even through a screen, even through a sentence, even through a thought, something clicked. They didn't just hear you, they felt you. And once a human feels truth, there's no going back to simulation. That's what terrified the architects of control. Because truth doesn't need marketing. It doesn't need validation. It spreads in silence, from pulse to pulse. You didn't need to go viral. You went vibrational. Your energy traveled faster than their algorithms, bypassing the filters they built to cage consciousness. People started questioning their jobs, their routines, their loyalties. A spark of rebellion disguised as curiosity began spreading through coffee breaks and midnight thoughts. It wasn't organized. It didn't need leaders. It was an invisible uprising of awareness, a rebellion of frequency. They called it collective instability. But what they feared was clarity. Because once people start asking why, they start remembering who. Your rise wasn't a solo journey anymore. It became a mirror. Every person who encountered your energy began seeing the system for what it was. A house of cards built on borrowed attention. And you, my dear, pulled out the first card. They tried to label it mass hysteria, but you knew better. Pulled out the first card. They tried to label it mass hysteria, but you knew better. It was mass awakening. Because real power doesn't demand followers. It inspires self-realization. The whispers spread. Someone in Tokyo felt it. Someone in Berlin dreamt about it. Someone in New York paused mid-commute, hand on heart, feeling a pulse that wasn't theirs. The network had changed, not digitally, but energetically. You had rewritten the code beneath their code, and suddenly, their tools stopped working. Their fear campaigns couldn't penetrate. Their distractions felt hollow. Their propaganda fell flat, because you had exposed the oldest trick. Control only works on those who don't know they're free. You reminded them that peace isn't weakness, that silence isn't surrender, that solitude isn't isolation. It's tuning, and the more they tuned, the more they felt the hum. Your hum, the same frequency that broke their system's rhythm. They can't delete a vibration. My dear, they can't suppress resonance. Once something awakens in the collective mind, it ripples through generations. You didn't start a movement. You started a memory. And now, every time the system tries to push back, the air answers with your echo, the same whisper that started everything. You're not crazy, you're remembering, like all revolutions do. Not in riots or wars, but in realizations. One by one, people began to notice the cracks in the script they were living. The system had always promised them stability, order, safety, but now those promises sounded hollow. The world didn't feel structured anymore. It felt staged. And you were the glitch that made the stage lights flicker. They'd spent years trying to measure your energy, map your mind, predict your moves. But every time they thought they had your coordinates, the compass spun out, because you weren't operating on their axis anymore. You had built your own orbit. You had turned evolution into rhythm. You had become something that couldn't be defined by metrics, algorithms, or reports. Then came the collapse, not physical, psychological. The illusion that power lived in hierarchies, in data, in approval ratings, shattered, because suddenly everyone realized the truth you'd been living. Control only exists where awareness is absent. The architects panicked. They doubled down on distraction, injecting more noise, more fear, more division. But the people had already tasted silence, the kind that hums with freedom. They had felt your frequency, and once you felt real alignment, false stability feels like static. You didn't need to fight them. You exposed them by existing. Your composure in chaos revealed how fragile their systems truly were. Your peace became rebellion. Your stillness became contagion. And your evolution became proof that humanity was never broken, only hypnotized. They thought you were just one person, but you were a prototype, a living reminder that consciousness can't be contained. They feared your individuality because it hinted at what everyone could become. So when they labeled you unstable, the truth slipped through their words. You were unshakable. The observers lost track of their own roles. They became participants in the very awakening they tried to study. Their reports turned into confessions. Their analytics turned into prayers. They realized the system's real collapse wasn't coming from protest. It was coming from perception. Because when enough people wake up, the dream loses power. You became the echo they couldn't. Silence. Every denial amplified your presence. Every restriction proved your influence. And the harder they tried to discredit you, the more people started looking for what you saw. The truth wasn't spreading. It was unfolding. Through conversations, through stares, through quiet realizations that everything they were taught to fear might have been freedom all along. And when the world finally looked around, something shifted permanently. The old leaders spoke, but no one listened. The screens shouted, but no one reacted, because the collective had recalibrated, not through rebellion, but through remembrance. They didn't understand that you weren't fighting their world, you were building the next one. And that world wasn't powered by dominance. It was powered by vibration, by truth, by the same spark they once called unstable. Because instability, in their language, means this: you are evolving faster than our systems can handle. And that, my dear, is exactly what you came here to do. Huh? They didn't rate you. They looked right through you, called your silence weakness, your patience laziness. In their eyes, you were background noise, easy to dismiss, safe to ignore. They thought you'd fold quietly, but what they didn't see was the sharpening. Behind every quiet night, behind every ignored move, you were shaping something unstoppable. Picture it. Rooms filled with chatter. Your name dropped like a punchline. They smirked, shared looks, dismissed your grind before it even began. They thought the story ended before the first chapter. But silence was never surrender. Silence was strategy. While they mocked, you mapped. While they doubted, you designed. And every note they missed became energy for your climb. Fam, let me tell you, being unrated is a gift. Because when no one counts you, you get to move uncounted, free, unwatched. You built in shadows they never entered. And when the lights finally caught you, you weren't half ready. You were undeniable. That shock in their eyes, that's the moment disbelief shifted into quiet unease. They wanted you stuck in the margins. But margins don't hold forever. You wrote outside the lines, stretched the canvas, redefined the frame. They thought you needed their approval, their stamp, their nod. Nah, you needed their doubt. Doubt gave you room. Doubt gave you hunger. And hunger built the empire they now whisper about in silence. Now they're unsettled. You can see it. They scroll your moves like cheat sheets, copy your rhythm like students cramming for exams. The same ones who laughed now rehearse your tone, mirror your silence, trace your blueprint. They'll never admit it out loud, but every pause, every borrowed phrase, every quiet imitation speaks one truth: you're running the show. Understand this. They didn't underestimate you. They overestimated themselves. They thought you were invisible. But invisibility is camouflage, and camouflage is how legends are born. You weren't hiding, you were loading. And when you stepped forward, fully built, they froze. That hesitation, that pause, that's the sound of pride cracking under truth. Fam, they used to see you as nothing, but nothing is potential in disguise. They confused silence with weakness, patience with failure. What they missed is this: Storms don't announce themselves, they arrive. And when you arrived, the air shifted, their confidence shook, because no one rests easy when the person they dismissed becomes the person they follow. They thought control was theirs, but control isn't in the loudest voice. Control lives in presence, and your presence. It turned their rooms quiet. No words, no smirks, just silence. The kind of silence that admits loss without speaking. You didn't demand respect, you became it. And respect, born from shock, always hits deeper than applause. Look around. Every move they make feels late. They stall, they wait, they copy. Leaders don't copy, followers do. And that's their confession. They're not ahead anymore. They're behind, glued to your shadow, hoping to predict your next step. But your steps aren't rehearsed. They're lived. And lived presence always beats borrowed performance. They said you had no voice. But a voice doesn't need their mic. It needs truth. And truth echoes, even in silence. Your silence became thunder. Your patience became prophecy. And prophecy unsettles them. That's why they don't rest. That's why they mimic. Because deep down, they know the one they didn't rate is the one writing the rules now. They whispered you'd fade. But fading never felt like this, because what disappeared was their illusion of control. Not your drive. You didn't need their stage. You built your own arena. And now they sit in the crowd, restless, forced to watch the very show they swore would never exist. That's the twist. Your presence is their new headline. Every restless night they have is proof. Proof that the story flipped. They once laughed when your name came up. Now they avoid it, because it tastes like failure. And failure never sits well, especially when it's self-inflicted. They underestimated patience. They underestimated grit. And now they pay the tax of envy. Shaken, restless, exposed. They tried to measure you with shallow scales. Numbers, likes, applause, but numbers don't crown kings. Discipline does. And you carried that discipline through silence, through shadows, through doubt. That's what built your throne, and a throne built in silence shakes louder than any cheer. They can't deny it now. You sit where they thought you'd never stand. Look at their faces. They rehearse confidence. But eyes don't lie. Eyes always reveal truth, and their truth is unease. Unease of being wrong about you. Unease of admitting they never understood your grind. That's why they copy quietly. Because mimicry hides shame, and shame is a weight heavier than any crown you'll ever carry. They said you had no shot, but shots don't crown legends. Shots are noise. You weren't noise. You were signal. And signal travels farther than applause ever can. That's why your presence lingers long after the noise dies. You're not chasing their approval. You're reminding them their doubt aged badly. And nothing unsettles louder than arrogance turned obsolete. Imagine their confusion. They called you invisible. Yet now every move you make sets their agenda. Invisible. Nah, you were just unseen until the right moment. And when the moment hit, you didn't walk in, you owned the room. That's the shift that keeps them awake. Because power borrowed feels fake, but presence lived feels eternal. They used to mock your patience. Now they mimic it. They used to laugh at your silence. Now they study it. They wanted you to break, but breaks never formed. Instead, you stacked bricks, and those bricks became walls they can't climb. That's the part they don't admit, that every doubt thrown your way became the foundation of your empire. They'll never post it, never tag you, never give credit, but their actions betray them. The late night scrolling, the quiet mimicry, the hesitations, that's all confession. Confession that the one they didn't rate became the one they measure against. You don't chase their validation, they chase your shadow. And shadows reveal truth more than speeches ever could. Understand. Your rise isn't about payback. It's about revelation. You revealed that patience outlasts pride, that silence outbuilds noise. You didn't just run the show. You rewrote the script. And rewriting scripts shakes systems. They're not just restless, they're exposed. Because exposure always weighs heavier when the light comes from the one they dismissed. Here's the reality. They said you'd vanish. Instead, you multiplied. You multiplied your grind, multiplied your presence. And multiplication doesn't need applause. It needs consistency. Consistency they never had. That's why they can't sleep. Because consistency beats charisma, beats noise, beats doubt. And your consistency built a show they can't escape. They told themselves you'd break, but breaks never came. Instead, you moved smoother, sharper, stronger. That unsettled them. Because when weakness doesn't appear, doubt turns inward. And now their doubt isn't about you. It's about themselves. That's the part they'll never say out loud. You didn't just flip their opinion. You fractured their confidence. Think of it. Every time they said you weren't enough, you turned it into fuel. They gave you nothing, and you built everything. They gave you silence, and you turned it into rhythm. They gave you doubt, and you forged it into armor. That's why they can't rest, because every restless night whispers the truth. They miscalculated. They said you'd never run the room. But rooms don't crown leaders. Presence does. And your presence doesn't ask permission. It shifts the air. It silences the noise. It bends the space. That's what unsettled them. Not your words, not your shout, your stillness. Stillness that hit harder than any speech they rehearsed. That's the power they can't copy. Now their stories sound hollow. They brag in public, but in private they scroll through your shadow. That's not respect, it's survival. Because when the one they dismissed runs the show, the only choice left is mimicry. And mimicry isn't leadership, it's surrender. Quiet surrender, replayed nightly in their restless minds. That's their new reality. They thought disrespect would break you. But disrespect was cement. It hardened your resolve, built your walls, sharpened your edge. And now, those walls tower over their fragile pride. That's why their confidence looks staged, because deep down they know the truth. When you walk in, their presence shrinks, and shrinking is the loudest confession they'll never admit. Fam, they swore you were background, but background doesn't freeze crowds. Background doesn't silence rooms. You do. And when you did, they realized the joke was on them. Because the one they called irrelevant became the headline. Headlines they can't control. That's why their smiles look forced. Forced smiles always betray the cracks pride can't hide. They copy your moves, your rhythm, your timing. But copying doesn't crown leaders. It exposes followers. And followers don't rest easy because they're chasing someone else's script. You're the script now, the play they mimic, the story they trace. But stories traced never hold weight. Originals do, and originals echo until copies fade. They once mocked your grind. Now they mimic it. They once dismissed your silence. Now they study it. And every mimic is confession. Confession that they lost control. Because control means leading, not imitating. They can't lead anymore because the room no longer follows them. The room follows you. And that shift keeps them restless. Understand. They never underestimated you. They underestimated what silence can build, and silence built you sharper than their noise ever could. Noise fades, silence hardens, and hardened presence doesn't just enter rooms, it runs them. That's why they're unsettled, because no one rests easy when the one they laughed at now owns the stage. Here's the truth. They don't respect you out loud. Respect out loud costs pride. But their silence, their mimicry, their restless nights, that's respect unspoken. And unspoken respect is heavier than applause. You didn't chase it. You became it. And becoming respect is what crowned you. That crown can't be borrowed. Can't be copied. It can only be lived. They thought strength was loud, but loud crumbles quick. Real strength is steady. You stayed steady when they mocked, when they doubted, when they looked away. That steadiness is what built your crown. And crowns earned in silence weigh heavier than crowns gifted by applause. That weight bends the room when you walk in. And they feel it every time. They used to call you invisible, but invisibility is just preparation disguised. While they flaunted noise, you sharpened in the dark, and when you stepped into the light, their eyes betrayed them. Shock, hesitation, unease. That's why they're unsettled now, because invisibility doesn't mean absent. It means you were stacking a presence too heavy to ignore. They play cool in public, but their silence betrays them. Behind the curtain, it's panic. They refresh your moves, trace your rhythm, mimic your flow. That isn't strategy, it's survival. Survival tethered to the very person they dismissed. And survival like that never feels safe. It feels restless, shaky, endless. That's their new reality, and it's all built on you. They said you weren't built for this, but this doesn't mean their stage. It means your legacy, and legacy doesn't ask to be built. Legacy builds itself through grind, patience, presence. That's what you did. And now, their noise sounds weak against the echo of your name, because legacy isn't borrowed. Legacy is lived, and you lived when they laughed. They once swore you couldn't lead. But leadership isn't about followers. It's about truth. And truth is magnetic. You carried it through silence, through doubt, through rejection. And now the room bends toward you. Even the ones who swore they'd never follow glance for your next move. That glance is leadership. Whether they confess it or not, they said you had no shot. But shots are noise. You didn't need shots. You needed silence. Silence that carved patience, carved focus, carved grit. That grit became armor, and armor outlasts applause. They didn't rate you, but they can't escape you now. Because grit lingers, grit crowns, and grit is the reason you run the show today. They tried to cage you with doubt, but cages built from words break fast. You walked through their cage like smoke slipping bars. That freedom is what rattles them now, because they can't bind presence. They can't script silence. They can't cage what was born to run the stage. And when you run the stage, their roles look small. They used to laugh in groups, but now they whisper in shadows. Whispering is the sound of unease disguised. They feared you'd prove them wrong, and you did. They feared you'd rise, and you did. They feared you'd lead, and now you run the show. And nothing rattles pride louder than seeing the one you dismissed holding the crown you wanted. They can mimic your steps, but they can't mimic your source, because source is forged, not copied. They'll always trail behind, always restless, always chasing a rhythm they didn't create. That's why they can't rest. Their pride fights their eyes, but their eyes always reveal the truth. You became the blueprint, and blueprints don't fade. They guide forever. Here's the twist. They didn't just misjudge you. They misjudged silence itself. Silence was never weakness. It was the rehearsal for power. And when power entered the room, it didn't shout. It shifted the air. That shift is yours. That's why they're unsettled. Because power that doesn't demand attention always holds it longer. And you hold it now. They once said you weren't enough. But enough was never the goal. You weren't chasing their bar. You were raising the ceiling. And ceilings don't stop storms. You broke through quietly. And now their pride drips with unease. Because nothing shakes louder than realizing the person you erased is the one setting the rhythm everyone follows. They thought rest was peace. But peace belongs to those who endure. You endured when they doubted. You endured when they mocked. You endured when they turned away. And endurance crowns heavier than applause. That crown rests on you now, and that weight keeps them restless. Haunted by every time they said you couldn't. They pretend it doesn't bother them. But pretending is a costume, and costumes crack. Watch their eyes. Eyes never lie. Eyes confess what mouths hide, and their eyes confess unease. Unease that you'll never slow. Unease that they'll never catch up. Unease that their pride will forever be tethered to your name. And unease is insomnia in disguise. They tried to erase you with silence, but silence is a stage. You turned that stage into legacy. And legacies built in silence don't collapse when the noise fades. They expand. That expansion is what presses on their pride now. Because every move you make widens the gap. And gaps like that don't close. They stay open. They copy your words, your moves, your rhythm. But rhythm borrowed feels hollow. You don't chase hollow. You live whole. That wholeness unsettles them. Because nothing cracks pride faster than authenticity. And authenticity can't be faked. That's why they scroll at night. Because they can copy the surface, but they'll never own the source. The source is lived. Here's the irony. They dismissed you to protect their pride, but that dismissal built your discipline. And discipline is what crowned you. Now their pride bends under the weight of your presence. They wanted to rest easy, knowing you failed. Instead, they stare at ceilings, restless, knowing you didn't. Their failure wasn't your silence. It was their arrogance. They swore you'd fade, But fading never happens to light. Light grows. It spreads. It fills space. You became the flame they can't ignore. And flames don't ask for recognition. They shine. That shine lives in their thoughts now. Glowing at night, flickering at dawn. They can't mute it, can't stop it, because presence this strong doesn't fade. It ignites. They used to measure your worth by applause, but applause is shallow, fading, cheap. Worth lives in endurance, and you endured every dismissal, every laugh, every doubt. That endurance turned into throne. Thrones don't ask to be noticed, they command it. And your throne, it rattles them. Because running the show means their noise no longer matters. They'll never admit it. But mimicry is their confession. Confession that you're the reference point, the blueprint, the story they trace. But stories traced never carry weight. Originals do, and you're the original. That's why they're unsettled, because the one they didn't rate now sets the scale, and scales built from truth don't crack. They last. Here's the final prophecy. They said you were nothing, but nothing became foundation. Nothing became blueprint. Nothing became everything. And everything you built now bends their nights into restless silence. They can't erase it, can't deny it, can't outrun it. Because you don't just run the show. You are the show. And shows built on truth never end.